Most cruise reviews are written from a poolside lounger on day 4. By that point, you've settled in, expectations have quietly adjusted, and you've started telling yourself those hour-long buffet lines are part of the experience. That's not a review. That's rationalization dressed up as acceptance. Here's what 19 cruises across 12 different lines taught me. The only genuinely honest read of a cruise ship happens in the first 4 hours after you board. Not the gala dinner on night 3. Not the shore excursion on day 6. The first 4 hours, from the moment you hand over your boarding card to the moment you sit down for your first real dinner on board. I call it the 4-hour rule. It works because those first 4 hours are when a ship can't hide. Staff aren't fully in performance mode yet. The kitchens are running hot chaos because thousands of hungry, tired travelers just arrived simultaneously. Your cabin may or may not be ready on time. The signage either makes sense or it doesn't. The way a crew member makes eye contact, or deliberately doesn't, tells you everything about how that operation is run at every level. All of it is raw, unpolished, and completely revealing. Every ship on this countdown earned its ranking based exclusively on that window. Stay with me until the end, because the number 1 ship has a boarding day detail that nobody in the cruise space is talking about. And it's the single biggest reason I'd rebook it tomorrow. Ship number 10, Norwegian Escape. She launched in 2015, which makes her a veteran by current standards, and Norwegian keeps launching flashier new ships that pull the spotlight. But here's what Escape consistently does better than almost any large ship currently sailing: the actual mechanics of getting you on board. Norwegian's pier team in Miami, where Escape is typically home-ported, has refined embarkation to something that borders on elegant. On most sailing days, you're through security, up the gangway, and holding your first drink within 45 minutes of arriving at the terminal. That matters more than people admit. A chaotic 2-hour embarkation line doesn't just waste your afternoon. It poisons your emotional state. You arrive irritated, the ship starts behind on goodwill, and it takes a full day to claw that back. Escape doesn't do that to you. Even in standard balcony cabins, the 4-hour rule holds. Cabin access by 1 p.m. on most sailings, genuinely clean, and the Garden Cafe buffet during boarding runs, real, hot, varied food. Not acceptable for a floating cafeteria food. Actually good food. That's the baseline against which I judge everything else. Celebrity Beyond is the ship that made me question what a cruise ship could even look like. Launched in 2022, designed by an interior team whose reference point was clearly a boutique harbor hotel rather than a floating resort, Beyond operates on a different frequency than most ships its size. Celebrity has refined their app-based boarding integration to the point where most of the embarkation paperwork is completed before you reach the pier. And you feel that efficiency the moment you arrive. What struck me hardest during those first 4 hours wasn't a single feature. It was this. Not one crew member walked past me without making eye contact. On a ship with nearly 3,300 guests, during the most operationally chaotic part of any sailing. That's not coincidence. That's culture, built deliberately from the top down, and it signals the entire voyage that follows. The Ocean View Cafe on embarkation day is genuinely one of the better buffets I've had at sea. The quality holds even when they're feeding a full ship of newly boarded passengers, which is the hardest test any ship kitchen faces. MSC World Europa. I'll be straight with you, my expectations here were low. An older MSC sailing I'd done years prior left an impression that took a while to shake. World Europa is not that ship. Launched in 2022 at 215,000 gross tons, making it one of the largest ships ever built. What caught me completely off guard in those first 4 hours was the food. Not the ship's scale, not the waterslide complex, not the casino. The embarkation buffet. Multiple live cooking stations, a legitimate sushi counter with actual staff behind it during boarding hours, and dietary options that go well beyond the usual token gluten-free shelf. That tells me something important about how this ship is managed. MSC still has inconsistencies in embarkation efficiency depending on the port, but once you're aboard, World Europa rewards you quickly and consistently. The dorsal fin design also means the interior layout is surprisingly navigable for her size. Your first 4 hours orientation walk actually makes sense, which, on a ship this large, is a genuine engineering achievement. Holland America, Rotterdam. I know some of you have already formed an opinion based on the brand name alone. That reputation, earned in an earlier era, is about 15 years out of date. Rotterdam, launched in 2021, is a mid-size ship at roughly 99,000 gross tons, and that scale is precisely its advantage during the 4-hour window. There's no crushing stampede of 7,000 passengers all discovering the same elevator bank. Boarding day on Rotterdam feels deliberately paced, calm in a way that, once you understand Holland America's philosophy, is clearly intentional. This ship is designed for people who cruise to genuinely decompress, not to hit every waterslide before lunch. The Lido restaurant during embarkation lunch is where Rotterdam quietly outpaces ships twice its size. Fresh-baked bread, real composed salads, a carving station with someone actually standing at it. And this detail, cabins ready by 12:30 p.m. on my sailing, everything genuinely prepared. Minibar stocked, welcome card placed thoughtfully. Hangers in the closet. Small thing. Enormous signal. The difference between feeling taken care of and feeling processed. Disney Wish. Stay with me. I understand the skepticism. What's a Disney ship doing on a list of the world's best? Here's my answer. Wish, launched in 2022, is one of the only ships afloat where the 4-hour boarding experience was engineered as a transformational moment rather than a logistical process. I watched a 7-year-old who had been crying at the terminal, overtired, done, walk through the Grand Hall atrium, look up at the Tinker Bell chandelier, and go completely still. That silence was wonder. It was designed into the architecture, and it works on adults too, even if we're less willing to admit it. For adults sailing without children, Disney Wish still holds up. The adult-only areas are genuinely excellent. The dining programming is some of the most creative at sea, and the bartenders in the Hyperspace Lounge are among the most engaging I've encountered on any ship at any price point. Disney's 4-hour experience is theatrical by design. On Wish, the theater is worth the ticket price. Queen Mary 2. This ship has been crossing the Atlantic since 2004, and every single time someone asks me what the pinnacle of the 4-hour boarding experience looks like, I come back to QM2. Here's why. Cunard runs what they call an embarkation day program, and it is the only ship in the world where I've boarded and been directed, with actual ceremony, to an afternoon tea already underway in the Queen's Room. White-gloved service, proper scones with clotted cream, a string quartet playing in the corner. On boarding day, while your cabin is still being prepared. That's not a cruise ship pretending to be a luxury hotel. That's a ship honoring a tradition, and you feel the weight of that tradition in a way that's hard to describe until you've experienced it. QM2's size also works for her during embarkation, large enough to absorb her 2,600 passengers without crowding, and the Brooklyn terminal is consistently one of the smoothest embarkation ports I've used anywhere in the world. Wonder of the Seas carries close to 7,000 passengers. Let that settle. 7,000 people, all boarding on the same day. And the embarkation on Wonder doesn't feel like a stadium evacuation. Royal Caribbean has refined the wave boarding system on Wonder to the point where most guests are aboard, drink in hand, within an hour of their scheduled arrival window. The neighborhood concept, 7 distinct zones rather than one overwhelming single deck plan, means your first 4 hours exploring the ship is actually a discovery rather than a frustration. You're not lost, you're finding things. The Surfside neighborhood, designed specifically for families with young children, maintains its own separate pool and dining area during boarding day, which quietly redistributes the crowd and makes the rest of the ship feel remarkably calm. Intelligent design that benefits every single passenger, regardless of whether they have kids or not. Norwegian Prima, the most debated ship in Norwegian's current fleet. Some cruisers genuinely love her. Others feel like they booked one ship and sailed on another. Both reactions make complete sense, and the 4-hour window is exactly where the divide emerges. Prima launched in 2022 as Norwegian's deliberate pivot. Smaller than the Breakaway Plus class, more design forward. Fewer of the traditional Norwegian signatures like the enormous waterslide complex and the packed atrium nightlife. If you board Prima expecting a bigger, better Norwegian getaway, those first 4 hours are going to feel like a bait and switch. But here's the thing. If you board knowing that Prima is a boutique statement, a calculated step toward a more premium product, the embarkation is actually lovely. The Indulge food hall format opens earlier than most ship restaurants on day one. Specialty dining is accessible sooner. The scale feels human rather than overwhelming. Prima rewards passengers who did their homework. It doesn't apologize for not being what it was never trying to be. The number one ship on this list is Icon of the Seas, launched in January 2024. The largest cruise ship ever constructed at 250,800 gross tons. And here is the detail that none of the launch coverage properly captured. Boarding Icon doesn't feel like boarding the largest ship ever built. That sounds impossible. It isn't. Royal Caribbean's design team spent years solving specifically that problem. How do you give nearly 8,000 passengers a boarding experience that feels personal, navigable, and welcoming rather than overwhelming? The answer is 8 distinct neighborhoods, multiple separate pool areas distributed across the ship's length, Central Park with living trees, and the most sophisticated embarkation flow engineering in cruise history. On a recent sailing out of Miami, I timed it. 43 minutes from arriving at the terminal to being seated in the Surfside neighborhood with a fresh coconut drink. 43 minutes for a ship with 8,000 guests. The staff-to-guest ratio on Icon is the highest in Royal Caribbean's fleet, and you feel it during that first window. Someone appears to help you before you've finished realizing you need help. That's not luck. That's intentional, expensive, and rare. Cabins were ready by 1 p.m., genuinely pristine, and the first dinner in the Empire Supper Club that evening was one of the finest meals I've had at sea. Icon wins the 4-hour test so comprehensively that I struggled to find a fault during that window. For a ship this ambitious, that's the most honest praise I know how to give. Here's what I want you to take away from all of this. Cruise pricing is real. Not everyone is booking Icon of the Seas or Queen Mary 2 next spring. But the 4-hour rule applies at every price point, on every ship, in every category. Whether you're doing a 4-night Bahamas run or a 14-night Mediterranean voyage, that boarding window is still your clearest signal. Pay attention to whether the crew sees you, whether the food is actually hot, whether your cabin is ready, and, most importantly, how the ship makes you feel before you've had time to lower your standards. Those early signals don't lie, and now you know exactly what to look for. Drop a comment and tell me, have you sailed any of these ships? And what was your boarding day actually like? I read every comment, and your real-world experiences shape what I research next. If you want to stay ahead of new ship launches, itinerary news, and the routes worth booking before they disappear, subscribe. New cruise content here every single week. Next up, I'm going ship by ship through every vessel in Royal Caribbean's fleet, ranked from the bottom of the pack to the one ship I'd pick if I only had one sailing left. You won't agree with all of it,